Until... Chapter 1. Jodi. With a week of performances under her belt, Jodi still hadn't got used to the explosion of applause at the end of each show. Each time it had taken her by surprise, and tonight was no different. She waited on her spot on the stage, her sister by her side, until it was their turn, along with the rest of the chorus, to step forwards and take their bow. Every single member of the audience was on their feet, whooping and cheering, and the noise and the lights took her breath away. When she was on stage, she liked to pretend there was no one watching, so it was always a surprise to be faced with a full auditorium. The production was a modern-day interpretation of Hansel and Gretel, turned into a musical with the shortened and somewhat abstract title, Gingerbread. The initial audience figures and feedback were beyond anything their director, Guy May, had hoped for. After every performance this week, he'd been ecstatic, as if what had occurred on stage had actually injected fuel into his blood. Jodi could understand why. Even standing on this stage, playing a small part in this big production, felt significant. As if they were all part of a show that was going to get bigger and better. It was a month-long run at the Whitlow Theatre on the outskirts of Stratford in the East End of London. It didn't class as a West End theatre, but it was one of the theatres used as a tester venue. The investors needed to know how a show would perform, and the whole cast were aware that this was a litmus test. It would give an indicator of how well the show could do over a longer period if it were to tour to one of the bigger theatres. It wasn't just the audience paying attention to how well Gingerbread was going. So far, the early reviews had been outstanding, and the shows had been packed. Jodi took her bow. Her sister, her 5'8" carbon copy, folded her body beside her. Even the way they did that was identical. People often commented on their synchronicity. It was only their personalities that told them apart. Harper, the more organised of the two, always arranging checklists and making sure they were prepared, with Jodi always more laid back. If one of them had a map in hand, it was a clear indicator that it was Harper. But right now, their deep breaths matched each other as they recovered from the final dance. The curtain came down in front of the whole crew, with various members adding their own whoops to the cheers coming from the audience, excitement pulsing in the air. "Again!" Guy said, indicating that the whole cast should take another bow. It wasn't something they did every night, but he clearly wanted to celebrate the end of a successful week. Tomorrow was Monday and would be their first day off, their only full scheduled day off each week. Obligingly, the curtain rose, and the audience, who'd been yelling "Encore!" gave a delighted standing ovation as the whole cast and crew took their bows again at the centre of the stage. Jodi loved the rush of a live performance. Even though she liked to pretend no one was there, that was just a trick to steady her nerves. In truth, it wouldn't be the same without people there to watch. The streak of tension it created pushed her to do her best. And experiencing the audience's appreciation, not through that inevitable steady, polite applause, but in the toe-tapping, arm-waving, rapturous, on-their-feet type of applause, was blowing her mind in the best possible way. Especially as this wasn't a one-off. It had happened at the end of every performance this week, and the buzz of being part of it was immense. Jodi glanced at Harper, her counterpart, knowing she felt the same glow inside. They took the few steps towards the front of the stage and took their second bow of the night. After each performance this week, they'd not been able to sleep once they'd returned to their rented flat. The adrenaline high had been coursing through their systems too intensely to just switch off as soon as they got back. Instead, they'd gathered on the sofa to analyse how everything had gone, with Harper taking notes. Whether they'd timed their moves to perfection, whether they'd managed to hit each note, whether there was anything they'd want to do differently for the next show. They weren't really in need of any director's notes when they'd become so good at providing their own post-show analysis. On these evenings, Jodi imagined her sister as a director in the future. Harper was methodical enough, that was for certain, whereas Jodi just joined in as a way of unwinding. The tremendous sound of the applause made Jodi focus on the moment. It continued as they straightened up, the last of the cast to do so. The stagehands soon followed, and then it was time for the curtain to descend.